Hello everyone, and welcome to Psychology 1000, General Psychology. This video is just to introduce myself and to talk about the course in general. We're not going to go into specific course content yet. I'll save that for the first module of the course, which should be up now. But this is the first thing to watch. This is the introduction to the course. I'll give a broad overview, what the course is about, and also talk about course policies. And everything I'm going to say here is going to be in the syllabus as well, which should be available on Blackboard. If you have any trouble finding it or opening it, just let me know. But again, this is just an introduction. So welcome to the course. Okay, so this course in particular, what is it about? Well, it's an overview of psychology, psychological processes, and mental function. So it's about the mind. How does the mind work as far as we know? What all is involved in mental function? So for example, we'll start with the history of psychology. We'll actually do that this first week. And as the course goes on, we get into specific fields. I'll go back and talk about the history of those fields a little bit. But this week's content is a lot about the history of psychology. People have been thinking about the mind for thousands of years. So how did that process evolve? How have theories about mental function evolved over centuries? And of course, a lot of changes got made once the scientific method was introduced. So we'll talk about that as well. We'll talk about methodology next week, actually. But this week we'll talk about the history, going back thousands of years, looking at people's thoughts on how the mind worked. What were mental functions? Where did thoughts reside, for example? Now, of course, we know that the brain is the critical organ for mental function. But for a long time, people weren't sure of that. And we'll talk about that in Module 1. But the brain is the most complex organ that we have. And it's been slow but steady progress trying to understand how it works. And we know quite a bit about how the brain works. We certainly don't know everything. There are a lot of things still to be found out about the brain. But we know some about how the brain works and how brain cells, called neurons, function, and how they support our mental processes. So we'll talk about the brain, we'll talk about the senses. How do we bring sensory information from the outside world in? How do we process it so that we know what's going on around us? What do we do with that information? We'll talk about things like learning and memory. These are very important mental processes. We have to be able to not just take in information, but store it, use it somehow. If it was just coming in and then it was gone the next minute, that wouldn't do us nearly as much good as if we could remember it. Remember what things are to be sought out, what things are to be avoided. How do we remember information like where we live, who our friends are? So we'll talk about learning and memory for a couple of weeks. We'll also talk about social psychology. Humans are inherently social creatures, and we depend on social interaction for our survival, but also for our mental health. That's not to say that every single social interaction benefits us, but social function is a critical part of our psychology. So we'll talk about how we are influenced by others, for example, how we learn from other people, how interacting with other people can be helpful or harmful. And so social psychology is a whole field within psychology. We'll also talk about psychological disorders. And there are numerous psychological disorders. We'll spend a couple of weeks on what the disorders are and the current approach to treating them. There unfortunately aren't treatments for all psychological disorders, but there are for many of them. There are therapeutic approaches. There are pharmacological approaches. And we'll talk about those different treatments, how effective they are, what the pros and cons are when it comes to psychological disorders. So that's the content of the course, and of course that will take the entire semester to go through. I've just summarized it there. But what are our objectives? What are we trying to do with this knowledge? Well, the first is to emphasize critical thinking. So this is a course about science, psychology. And of course part of science is evaluating evidence, trying to see how plausible a certain theory is, or a hypothesis, or trying to interpret data. So that's what critical thinking is about. It's about evaluating the evidence in front of us and deciding whether or not a certain conclusion is supported. And so we'll be using that a lot. Of course, one of the points of the course is just to give you a general background in psychology, to give you knowledge about each of these little subdisciplines. And I say little, each of them is a giant field unto itself, but because there's so much content, this will be a broad overview. And perhaps if you're interested in a particular topic, like the brain or cognition, thinking, or social psychology or psychological disorders, the department has follow-up courses for each of those topics. And so if one of them particularly interests you, there is a course that you can take to learn a bit more. And of course, there are entire careers in the field of psychology, and we'll talk about that this week as well. And finally, I want to give you an appreciation for the fact that psychology operates on a lot of different scales. What do I mean by that? Well, certainly we have the individual, and mental function is an important part of the individual. It's what helps us get around in the world. It's what motivates us, helps us derive satisfaction from certain actions, certain endeavors, lets us relate to other people, for example. Social function, again, a very important part of psychology. But it operates on scales beyond just the individual. It operates on a very small scale. So when we're talking about the brain, we can go down to individual cells and even individual parts of cells. We can go up to entire societies or the world at large. How does psychology impact our society's function? So thousands, millions, even billions of people. So that's a very large scale. So we go from the very small to the very large, and psychology is important, and psychology research goes on at all of these scales. So part of the course is giving you an appreciation for that, that psychology covers a wide range of applications.
So that's what the course is about. I do want to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about who I am and how to get a hold of me. So I am Dr. Damon Tomlin, and I will be your instructor for this entire course. I'm looking forward to teaching it. I hope you're looking forward to taking it. This is my email address, dtomlin@uccs.edu, and that is the best way to get a hold of me. I'll talk about my office hours here in a minute, but email, as I'll mention again later, is the main form of communication in this course. So please do use my UCCS email address. More about email in a minute. This is my office. So it's on the 4th floor of Columbine. It's pretty easy to find. It's in the psychology area. So again, 4th floor of Columbine. My office hours are by appointment. And so what that means is there's not a set time that I will be available in the office for a meeting for this course. However, if you send me an email, we can set up a meeting time. I am generally available on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't, just let me know and we can work out an alternate time to meet. So this is an online course. The scheduling is sort of up to you as to when you take in course content. So I'm not going to pin you down to a particular set of times for office hours because I know many of you have difficult schedules. For some of you, that's the reason you're taking an online course as opposed to a course in a classroom setting. So office hours by appointment, just send me an email, we can set up a meeting. We do have a teaching assistant for this course, Josh Mantovani. This is his email address. He also has a UCCS email address, so please use that. His office is Columbine 4044, so also on the 4th floor of Columbine. He has office hours on Tuesdays from 12:30 to 1:30. So if you drop by then, he should be there. And you can talk about class content, you can talk about class structure if you like. For the most part, if you have questions about the way the course is set up or grading or criteria, the sort of infrastructure parts, those emails should probably go to me. Things about course content, you can ask either Josh or myself. And email is the primary method of communication, so you should use our email addresses to try and get a hold of us. And course announcements and our other communication will also go to your UCCS address. I know not everyone uses their UCCS address as their main email, but do check that email frequently because that's the only one we'll have. and it's the only one that we'll send class announcements to, so bear that in mind. When you write an email, please try to be clear what you're asking for, what you're asking about. Of course, be respectful. That sort of goes without saying. And also give Josh and myself at least 24 hours. So sending multiple emails won't increase the likelihood it'll grab our attention. In fact, it just gives us more to sort through. So please give us 24 hours to respond to an email. Sometimes it takes a while to find the answer to your question, especially if it's a question about departmental policies or procedures. We have to go find that information. So again, give me 24 hours and I promise I will get back to you. And do read the syllabus. So many times a question the answer can be found in the syllabus. So there's no need to take the time to write an email, send it, wait for a response. A lot of the information about the course can be found in the syllabus. So do read it and do keep up with the syllabus. There is a course schedule. So I'll talk about the way the course is structured next. But the syllabus schedule is important. So there are due dates for assignments. Within a given week, it will be up to you to schedule your own time. But also, you don't want to fall behind on class content. So do read the syllabus, do keep up with the course schedule. Okay, a word on course materials. Now again, you can find the syllabus on the course website. The syllabus is a very important part of the course. It will tell you when assignments are due, what assignments are, and assignments in this course are primarily exams. But it will also tell you what course content is coming up and when it's coming up. So there should be a link on the course website. If you just click on that, you can see the syllabus, download it in PDF format. So that should be available to you at your leisure. A quick word on the schedule. So first, as I mentioned, keep up with the course schedule. Don't fall behind when it comes to class content. Trying to cram all of the material on an exam into a single week is a little bit daunting, and odds are you won't be able to absorb it as well as if you adhere to the syllabus and keep pace with the course. For this spring semester, you of course have spring break off. I do not post new content during spring break, nor do you have to submit any assignments during spring break, so you have that week off. The textbook is the 4th edition of the textbook Psychology by Schachter, Gilbert, Knock, and Wegner. So be sure to get a copy of the textbook. Be sure to keep up with the readings. Do the readings before you try to absorb the lectures. So lectures in this course, a lot of them draw on the textbook heavily, but not all of the content in lecture is in the textbook. So sometimes I add things that are interesting or things that are important that the authors of your textbook don't necessarily go into. So the textbook is the best start to understanding the material, but it's not the only thing you need to consider. As far as the textbook goes, I think it's a good book. I think it covers all the relevant areas. I think it's well written. I think it's even occasionally funny. And you'll notice if you look at the syllabus that I do the chapters a little bit out of order. I happen to like my order a little better, but that's not an indictment of the textbook. The textbook, again, is excellent. I just like my order for the content a little better, so it's not exactly the order of the chapters as presented in the textbook. Technology for this course. So this is an online course. It's entirely online. There's some technology involved. And a lot of this is basic stuff that you probably already have. So you need speakers or headphones, some way of hearing me during lecture. You probably already have that. Your computer probably already has built-in speakers, but you will need to use those to watch lecture. You'll also need the ability to look at PDFs or Word documents. So things like the syllabus, things like study guides will be in either PDF or Word format. So you'll need software that can open those documents. Odds are you already have it. Microsoft Silverlight is a program that, again, you probably already have installed, but if you don't, go ahead and install it. It's not that my materials in particular use MS Silverlight, but Blackboard in general employs it. And so you'll need MS Silverlight for certain components of Blackboard to function properly. A word on web browsers. So some people have the most luck with Mozilla Firefox. I personally use Google Chrome and don't have any problems. But if you do have a problem, especially if it's a browser that's not one of the major browsers, you may want to consider using Mozilla Firefox. It tends to work the best. Again, that said, I don't have any problems using Blackboard, and I don't use Mozilla Firefox, but just something to keep in mind. And then the Respondus Lockdown browser is a special browser just for exams. So it is a browser whose sole purpose is to let you take exams through Blackboard or also through Canvas. Here we're using Blackboard this semester. And so that is a browser that keeps you from having other windows open. It's the only application you can have open at that time. And again, it's designed to work for exams in Blackboard. So you'll need to download that, make sure it works, download it early. Don't wait until the last minute because while I've never had a problem with it, if you wait till the last minute to take an exam and then only then download the browser, sure enough, you'll have some problem and you won't be able to take the exam in time. So don't let that happen to you. Just go ahead and download the Lockdown browser if you don't already have it and install it, test it out, make sure it works.
So how is the course set up? Well, of course, it's entirely online. So there's no need to be on campus. It will be all the content, including the exams, will be delivered online. And it's through Blackboard, which again, you obviously are accessing because you're watching this video. It's what we call asynchronous. So I record lectures, I post content, and you can watch that content, you can look at that content from week to week on your own schedule. So there's no need to sign in at a particular time to participate in class. It is on your schedule. That being said, there are things that will be due at the end of a week, for example. So you have a week to get the work done. But within that week, it's on your schedule. That's why we call it asynchronous. Everyone doesn't have to be online at the same time. And the course is broken up into modules. So every week, there will be a module that's posted. Now, the way the syllabus is structured, one module will often carry into the next week. But the modules themselves will cover a unit of content. So we'll have a module on learning, a module on social psychology. And so those modules help divide the content of the course into subject areas. And you can find those modules under course content in that menu bar on the left side of Blackboard. Now when you open a module, you'll see different types of content. One of the things is the overview and the task list. So the overview is just what it sounds like. It gives you the overview of the course content for that module. It tells you what that module is about. So in roughly a paragraph. The task list is the set of things you'll need to complete for that module. So this is things like complete the assigned reading, watch the lectures. I'll also be posting practice quizzes. Those are optional, but they are good practice. Also, when there's an exam that's due, that will be part of the task list as well. There are assigned readings from your textbook. So every module will have 2 lectures in it, sometimes 3. And every lecture has a reading that goes along with it. And you can look those up in the syllabus. It will also be in the task list what the reading is. So be sure to do those because those help familiarize you with the course content before lecture. There are the lectures themselves, and they'll be much like this one. So it'll be a set of slides where I will talk about the content from the book and from other sources as well, but talk about that module's content. What's the subject area? And again, I do emphasize lectures in this course, so the lectures will involve some textbook-based content. But I'll also bring in other content as well. So don't assume that you can just do the reading and skip the lecture and know everything that you need to know. So on the exams, for example, I emphasize the content from lecture, which again may not be in the textbook. I'll add things in as well. So lectures are always going to be videos. I will also always post the slides for those lectures so that you can download them, print them out, take notes on them, whatever you want to do. As I mentioned, there will also be practice quizzes. So those are short quizzes just for your benefit. They are not part of your grade for the course. I do not require them. It is up to you whether you take them or not, but they're just a way of testing your knowledge on that module's content. There's also the class discussion board, which you can access using the menu bar on the left side of Blackboard. And the discussion board has two components to it. There's the section for questions about the course. So if you have a question about some area of content, you didn't understand the concept, you want me to go into more detail, or refer you to other sources to look up more detail on, that's one section. So questions about the course. The other section is the class discussion board. And every week I will post one or two questions that pertain to that module. And we'll talk more about the requirements there next. But the discussion board is another important part of the course. It's going to get you interacting with your classmates, interacting with me. It's going to get you thinking about that week's topic and hopefully engage in those critical thinking skills.
Okay, a little bit of information to wrap up. First, a word on grading. Your grade is split into three components. The first and biggest of which is the exams. So exams are worth 80% of your grade. There are 5 of them. They are spaced evenly throughout the course, and each one covers between 5 and 7 lectures. The exams are not cumulative, not even the final. The final exam is really just the 5th exam. It covers the last few lectures. It's not worth any more than the other exams are, but there are 5 exams total, and they determine 80% of your grade. You will need the Respondus Lockdown browser to take them, and they are always due on Friday night, 11:59 p.m. You can check the syllabus for the due dates. They become available when the last lecture that the exam covers becomes available. And from that point, you'll have nearly 2 weeks to take the exam. Your lowest exam in this course is dropped, so that should certainly help your grade. So you have nearly 2 weeks to take the exam, and your lowest exam grade is dropped. And because of that, effectively speaking, there are no makeup exams for this course. You have nearly 2 weeks, the lowest grade is dropped. You should be able to find time in those 2 weeks to take the exam. Under certain extraordinary circumstances, I will consider a makeup. If you are hospitalized for 2 weeks and cannot take the exam, I will need documentation of that, but I will consider a makeup. But things like having a busy week at work, losing your internet connection for a couple of days, having a cold, these are not sufficient to warrant a makeup. And in that case, if you really can't take the exam by the due date, then that just becomes a 0, and that is exam that will get dropped at the end of the course. So bear that in mind. With that in mind, I would not skip intentionally any of the exams, because emergencies pop up, and suddenly you might find you can't take one of the exams, and if you already skipped one exam because you had a busy week, well, then suddenly you're going to be in trouble. So don't do that. Just take all the exams, do your best. The exception is if you've taken exams 1 through 4 and you're happy with your grade, then you can skip exam 5. But again, I would not advise skipping any of the earlier exams. And really, if you want your grade to be the best it can, I wouldn't advise skipping exam 5 either. Second component of your grade is discussion. Discussion is 10% of your final grade. So every module will have 1 or 2 discussion questions, and you will answer those questions via the class website discussion board. So I, again, will post 1 or 2 questions per module. Your responses to those should be thorough. Aim for around 150 words, maybe a bit more, if you feel like it. They should be clear, well written. They should be on topic. They should respond to the question. And these questions will tend to be open-ended. These are not tests of knowledge. I will not ask you a question that you can look up in your textbook or look up in lecture. Often I'm asking for your opinion or asking you to relate course content to a personal experience. So these are sort of up to you. You need to respond to 5 questions throughout the semester. So that's not a lot. That's not even half of the questions that will be posted. But you do need to respond to 5 different questions. You can respond to multiple questions within a week, but you cannot respond to the same question multiple times and get credit for it. The discussion credit will periodically get updated in your grades on the course website, so you can be on the lookout for that. Sometimes it lags a week or 2 behind just because it takes time to process, but your discussion grades will be posted periodically. And again, you need to participate 5 times with responses that are clear, thorough, on topic, and of course respectful, especially if you're responding to another student's post, which you are welcome to do. Once you've responded 5 times and gotten full credit, you are done with the discussion requirement. You can, of course, participate more if you like to, if a particular topic interests you, but you are not obligated to. The third component of your grade is the research requirement. It's worth 10%. And there are 2 ways to take care of it. One is through SONA experiments. So the SONA system is the psychology department's way of having people participate in experiments. For every experiment you participate in, you can get half or 1 or more SONA points, depending on the length of the experiment. You will first have to register with the SONA system. So the syllabus has a link to that. And that is the most common way to satisfy the research requirement, is through the SONA system. The other way is through summarizing research articles. The research articles can be found on the course website. There are going to be a lot of them, and you can select up to 5 of those and summarize them. You can see the syllabus for guidelines on those summaries. They need to be 1 page. They need to be in your own words, so it's not just copying and pasting from the article. But that's another way to get research requirement credit. Every summary you do is equivalent to 1 SONA point, provided it's done properly. And again, once you've gotten those 5 points, you've satisfied the research requirement. It is possible to get extra credit. So effectively, you get extra research points, either by doing more SONA experiments or by summarizing extra articles. If you get up to 3 additional points, that's worth up to 3 final points on your final grade. Those are percentage points. And of course, you have to satisfy the research requirement first. So once you've done that, then if you keep on summarizing articles or participating in experiments, you can get up to 3 points in either category or a mixture and get 3 points added to your final grade. Accommodations. So if you have an accommodation that's documented by Disability Services, please get that documentation to me as quickly as you can. That way I can update course materials, set up exams to take account of that accommodation, and so please get those to me as soon as you can.
Okay, that will do it for this welcome video. So Module 1 is already posted. Now that you've seen this and are familiar with some of the course requirements and some of the course content, be sure to look at the syllabus, but then feel free to look at Module 1. And there we'll be learning about the history of psychology and a little bit about methodology. We'll be leading that into week 2. So be sure to check out both those lectures under Module 1. And I will see you then.